the MLB Hall of Fame is always a big topic, a big debated topic in the baseball world. And it's one where we're just starting to figure out the chances of some players getting into the Hall of Fame right now, as the first few ballots are coming out for the 2023 Baseball Hall of Fame class. John and I, we're going to discuss it for everyone. Small hall, big hall, right here on Bleacher Brawls. My name is Derek. I'm here with John, and let's get straight into it. So first things first, we're gonna start like this. A lot of questions come up between with a lot of non-voters and voters on, especially from fans like us to the voters, is why do you vote for so few players? And there's a small hall contingency and a big hall contingency. I'll start off with you, John. Where do you fall in that debate?
Derek, I'm actually a small hall guy. I prefer I always like when I do my ballot, I try to see if I can keep it under 10. I like it just as a challenge. I think there's a lot of guys that get votes for being like the Hall of Good.
The Hall of Very
So
Good,
I tend to I tend to decide to say, hey, let's try to keep it a small hall. But then, like, as much as I say I'd like that, I do always end up saying, oh, well, I vote for this guy. Maybe he's not a Hall of Famer, but I'd vote for him anyway. I'd vote for him because I like him. So, I mean, I say I'm a small hall guy, but my actions, if I had a vote, would probably make me more of a big hall guy.
Yeah, I would say I'm more of a big hall guy, but I'm not like let everyone in. I'm a little bit more picky and choosy and being a big hall guy though. Like I'm big on relievers. And if you're a reliever and you are one of the better relievers, if you're one of the best relievers of your era, you should probably be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, being a relief pitcher, I don't think should hurt you because it's just another position, just like being a designated hitter. And we saw that with David Ortiz last year. Just like that's how I feel about it. Like that's an example. Also, I'm willing to forgive a guy for having a shorter career if his prime was like elite. Um, but I'm not crazy on guys who have super long careers but never had a really good prime. They were just consistent. So I'm I'm a little small on guys who are just consistent over like a 20-year stretch, but I'm big on guys who had that very good prime, that good, 7, 8 year stretch. Um, but I think with that
So
out of
mentioning that, can I just? I'm sorry to interrupt, you mentioned the guy that puts up numbers for 20 years just consistently, but doesn't do anything great. One of those guys is Craig Biggio. And Luke and I went to Houston to watch we saw an Astros Rangers game in Houston at that field, Minute Maid Park. I wore my Yankee shirt. Luke wore a Red Sox shirt. I banged on every trash can that I walked by. But when we checked in the hotel that we were going to stay in that night, we were like, hey, is there a bar we can go to? Because the Yankees and Red Sox were playing that day. So we watched that game and then went to the Astros Rangers game an inning or two late. But we said the woman says to us like Big Joe's is what I hear. And Luke thinks he hears something like something else, whatever it was, Bijoux. And we're like, where is this place? And then we walk around the corners. We're trying to find this place. We're trying to Google it. Like, what is she talking about? And there's this big sign, Biggio's. And we're like, so Biggio's, like, how did you not pronounce Biggio's? If you're in Fenway Park and the next guy, and the restaurant's called Yastrzemski's, I don't get that's a way harder to pronounce than Biggio. You'd be able to say it. Same thing with the Yankees. I mean, whoever you need to put in there, like, it drove me crazy. Houston is not a real fan base. And there's my daily Houston rant for the night. I'll get off it. Houston's not a real fan base.
Yeah.
But back to what you were saying, Derek. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. But with our kind of stuff out of the way on big all small, let's start breaking down this year's ballot. Obviously, I think there's about 25 guys, maybe a little bit more, maybe it's like 27, 28. But we're each gonna kind of go through guys who we think should be in the Hall of Fame, or at least we would vote for. So I'll start with John. Just list out the guys who you would vote for.
Okay, so here I'll start with my top three definite are getting a vote no matter what. One, that's Gary Sheffield. I loved Gary Sheffield, especially as a Yankee. I know how not everybody feels that way. I loved Gary Sheffield. he brought an intensity that has been unmatched since Paul O'Neill. Like during that span, O'Neill retired, and a couple years later, you got Gary Sheffield, and everybody loved Paul O'Neill for being a warrior. I felt Gary Sheffield was basically the same guy. I loved the bat wag and just one thing he said. I remember they talked about what do you think of pitchers like because Jason Giambi was batting ahead of Gary Sheffield in the lineup at that time, and like what do you think if pitchers walking walking Jason Giambi to face you? And he says, I think it's stupid because you can strike Giambi out. You can't strike me out. And it was just, and it was true though. Like he had the lowest amount of strikeouts in baseball. Like during that era, he was so good. Just always put the ball in play, hit the ball hard. Like before exit velocity, like I would have loved to know what some of his exit velocities were. And the fact that he got to be good because Doc Gooden would throw fastballs at him like as a kid, like, and it just made him so much better. Like the whole thing's just an amazing story. I like the guy. To me, Hall of Famer, unquestionably, Gary Sheffield. He gets vote number one. Vote number two, I'm voting for A-Rod. I absolutely am. I know there's the steroids and it's whatever, but there's other steroid guys that are already in the Hall of Fame. We're gonna get that again later on when we talk Veterans Committee. But you know what? Like, maybe he doesn't get in, and I understand people not voting for A-Rod, so maybe he probably doesn't even get in, but he does get my vote because I do think he really was a great player, and he was an idiot and. He was an idiot, but I'd love to at least see him stay with at least 5% of the vote so he at least gets talked about every year. I mean, to me, that's part of the reason why I'm voting for A-Rod, because I realize he may never get in the Hall of Fame. And lastly is Beltran. Beltran was just such a really good center fielder, excellent hitter, just all-around talent. And I know that cheating with the Astros thing, and I hate the Astros and all, and I know he was part of that. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna look aside at the moment and say, like really he is a Hall of Famer, Carlos Beltran. So I'll start with those three. I can give you my three definites. Do you want to do the same thing or do you want me to keep going?
I'll give you my locks. Like I said, I'm a big reliever guy. So Billy Wagner is a total lock. K-Rod's also a lock for me. Like I said, relievers, if you're one of the best relievers of your era, I think you should get into the Hall of Fame. I think both those guys are two of the best relievers of their era. Billy Wagner's probably the best left-handed reliever we've seen in recent history. So, I think those two definitely guarantee votes. Scott Rowland, I have him as a lock. What he meant to those Cardinals teams, and also like, yeah, there are bigger names on those teams than him, but they had those big names, but he was still just as crucial as a part to those teams as the other big names around him. And those are probably my three closest locks. The only other guy who I would say is a lock for me is Todd Helton because of what he meant to that Rockies franchise. And this is another thing where I'm kind of a little bit of a big call guy on is if you're one of the most important players to your franchise's history, which Todd Helton is to the Colorado Rockies, he should be in the Hall of Fame. If as a Rockies fan, you shouldn't be able to go to the Hall of Fame and see one of the best players in your franchise history just not be there. And it's not like Todd Helton was like not a good player. He's borderline Hall of Fame for most people. So for me, just the fact that he's such important to that franchise, I think that kind of makes him a lock for me.
Awesome. I'm glad you mentioned those two guys because they were the next two guys on my list. So one, absolutely Scott Rowland is getting my vote because just so like everything you said, and I don't know, I think you mentioned he was elite defensively. If not, he was elite defensively. Just such a great fielder. Did he start with the Angels? Am I correct with that? He started in the American League, didn't he? I wanted him out of the American League. Or am I forgetting someone else? Whatever.
I'll check that while you're talking.
Yeah, not important. No, Philly. He started in Philly. All right, never mind. I'm confusing him with Troy Glauson, maybe. Doesn't matter. Scott Rowland, though, I'm not confusing Scott Rowland when I think of him as a Philly and a Cardinal. Just excellent player, belongs in the Hall of Fame. And the same thing with the Helton thing. That's the one where it's like where I hesitate because it's like how much of that is playing Coors Field, but like at least some of his numbers. But like you said, you make a very good point when you say like he's one of the most important players in that franchise. With me, I think Larry Walker is the first name that comes to mind for me, just because I'm that age. But like Todd Helton would be number 2 on that list. So I definitely think when you put it like that, Todd Helton belongs there. So for me, after that, look, I voted for A-Rod. I voted for Carlos Beltran. I have to give a vote to Manny Ramirez. He was the scariest right-hand hitter of a very long stretch in the American League. I hated seeing him from the bat. Killed the Yankees. Killed every team. Attitude problems happen, but at the end of the day, like I don't think it changes really what he was. And as far as the steroids are concerned, I think he's elite hitter before steroids. And I don't know how much of his career was steroids just later in his career, was his entire career. I don't know. Again, other steroid users in the Hall of Fame, A-Rod still getting my vote, whatever. Manny Ramirez was one scary hitter. Yeah. And so I'll do one more here. And I don't know. I want for what I said about A-Rod being on the ballot for the 5% and be talked about. Like, I want Andy Pettitte to be talked about. And here's the weird thing. I'm diehard Yankees fan. I love Andy Pettitte, but I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I think he's just a notch below a Hall of Famer. I think I vote for him to say, hey, let's keep him on the ballot. But I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think Mike Mussina is a Hall of Famer. Mike Mussina is in the Hall of Fame. Maybe that's a conversation for a different day. Mike Mussina was not a Hall of Famer. And I actually think Andy Pettitte is better than Mike Mussina. And I still don't think Andy Pettitte's a Hall of Famer. My friend Cindy, oh God, Cindy, I love you. And I'm so glad I get to mention you on this. My friend Cindy and I and her family, we'd call him Andy Pathetic because there was a couple of years there where he was really Andy Pathetic. But we both love Andy Pettitte. And I still wear my Andy Pettitte shirt every now and then when I miss Connecticut. And so he gets my vote, but I don't actually think he's a Hall of Famer.
He's one of those guys who was good for really long, but he never had that like sustained peak of being like that really like that Hall of Fame level player, right? Like he was good for what, almost 20 years, almost. Or like 18 years, I think it was, but he was never that, like, he never had that peak that, for me, a guy like an Andrew Jones had, where Andrew Jones had that peak, but he didn't have the longevity. And for me, I'm looking at it, for me, like, I think A-Rod I'd probably vote for. Same thing with Manny, because for me, the whole steroid thing, you can't knock the players for steroids if you have the commissioner who allowed it in the Hall of Fame.
Thank you. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I feel the same exact way. They keep going, but yes, I 100% agree with
Selig never got. He never took a hit for allowing it to happen and not enforcing the rules. So why should the players take a hit? It's like there's no double standard.
And these writers that weren't writing about it, that knew it was going on at the time, are the same guys not voting for the players to get in. So think about it like that. Writers, like I'm putting you on blast too.
Yeah. Well, I'll bring up Carlos Beltran because I know you already brought him up. I would vote for him. I'd vote for A-Rod, Manny, and I'd also vote for Andrew Jones. So that's 4 plus my original 4. So I'm already at 8.
All right. So I'm at 5, 6 with Andy Pettitte. And Ramirez 7. All right. Yes, I'm at 7. I think I'm capping out it there because you're right. Andrew Jones for a couple of years had that peak, but then there's the second half of his career, which sticks in my mind. Matt Cain. I got to see a game at AT&T Park when I was out in San Francisco years ago. I saw Matt Cain versus Josh Johnson, and it was the game where Brian Wilson wore those orange cleats that caused a whole controversy because they're distracting. Have pictures of it, actually. Matt Cain, I like the guy, so I just want to mention him, though I'm not voting for him. Jimmy Rollins is a really, really good player, but again, really, really good, not necessarily great. And Bobby Abreu is on this list. I never liked Bobby Abreu. I thought he was a me first guy. I know he was a bad influence on guys like Robinson Cano and Melky Cabrera. And the way he looked at Kim Jones when she was interviewing him after like Yankees games and post game interviews, he made me uncomfortable watching it. So I can only imagine how uncomfortable it was for her. Bobby Abreu was a bad guy. Nobody should vote for him, or just not even a bad guy. Just I don't like Bobby Abreu. I don't think he deserves a vote. Jeff Kent was just all right. So, and it's like you said earlier with the Andy Pettitte thing, just to touch on that one more time, he was never like a top pitcher in baseball. Like, I don't even know if there's, and many times he's a top 10 pitcher in baseball, maybe 1 or 2 years, but it wasn't even consistent. Whereas Sheffield was a top hitter in baseball, A-Rod a top hitter in baseball, Beltran just top all around player in baseball, Roland top defender, like just possibly period, not even just third baseman. He might be like the best fielder of his position, just like in general during his entire career. Helen best Rocky, Ramirez best right-handed hitter of his era for years there. And Pettitte was just a couple times a top 10 best pitcher, but to keep him on the ballot, he gets my vote. So I'm at 7 and I'm going to stop it there.
Yeah, so I'm at 8. I have Beltran, I have Helton, Andrew Jones, Manny, A-Rod, K-Rod, Roland, and Billy Wagner. There are a couple guys I do want to bring up that neither of us have mentioned yet. Mark Burley, I feel like he's in a similar conversation as Pettitte. I think he was a little bit better than Pettitte. Not as long of his career as Pettitte, but he was always good. Just he had like a really good 2005, but he never had like that sustained peak of excellence, I feel, and I feel like that's where he falls a little bit short for me. Um, got I would love to vote in Mike Napoli's beard in 2013. I would love to vote that beard in, but he's not going to get my vote. John Lackey's not going to get my vote either. Although John Lackey did start 2 World Series clinching games for the Angels and for the Red Sox, so that's a little cool tidbit for him. There's a lot of names though. You look at here, and I want to bring this guy up specifically because when I first saw it, looked at the ballot, didn't go looking into numbers. I see the name Torrey Hunter, and I go, "Oh, might be a Hall of Famer." Let me look at the numbers. I went and looked at the numbers. I went, I don't know. And that's a guy where if I was going off like my personal bias, I really like Torrey Hunter. I might say, but when I looked at the numbers, I went, I don't know if that's a Hall of Famer. I think that's where I follow Torrey Hunter. I think when I look deeper into the numbers, the only other guy I want to bring up, Houston Street. Big reliever guy, he's on the borderline for me. I think part of the only thing that maybe holds me back is the fact that he wasn't at the K-Rod Billy Wagner level, and he only had like 10 years realistically. He only had because his second to last year he had like a 6.40 ERA, and then his last year he only pitched like 3 games. His last MLB appearance, he was only 33 years old. So maybe could have gone further, just based on like age, but he's on that borderline. This year, I'd probably say no. But, if I go and look at next year and I take a look back and I might see something different that I like. I'm like, oh, maybe I will vote for him. But as of right now, I say no. So I think I kind of cap mine at 8. I know you brought up Sheffield. Sheffield's like on that border for me, but I'm gonna cap my vote at 8. So he kind of like if I was going past 8, if I was like forced to pick 2 more, I'd probably go Sheffield, and I'd maybe just go Houston Street. But I'm not crazy over Houston Street. And Sheffield is one of those guys where to me it's a toss up. So if I was gonna vote for a 9th person, it would be Sheffield. But I'm capping my vote at 8.
All right. So 2 things. I'm keeping a list of what we were saying, and when you mentioned Billy Wagner and K-Rod, I must have accidentally deleted them off my list because I never thought to bring them up. It's hard for me because I remember both of those guys as Mets, and like we all know what happens when you go to the Mets.
Yeah.
That being said, I think since I do have I do have room on my ballot, I'm going to do Billy Wagner because I do think longevity. He really did have a long career. He was a really good reliever. And like Mets, playing for the Mets aside, I think he deserves the Hall of Fame vote. Frankie Rodriguez, I'm not going to because I don't feel like it was as long, and I just didn't like him. Again, another guy I just didn't like. So we'll just keep him off the list. I won't say why, but if you Google like Frankie Rodriguez, father-in-law, I'm sure you could figure out a reason why I don't like him. And lastly, Houston Street. I'm glad because I really want to bring him up. My wife went to University of Texas, big Longhorns fans in this house. And since I do have room, Houston Street, you already or Hudson Street, whatever, you're getting my vote simply because you're a Texas Longhorn, and I want to see a Texas Longhorn get a vote. So he's on the list.
Yeah. No, I think for me, like Billy Wagner, he gets the longevity vote as well as the really good peak vote as well. He was like elite, and he also had a long career too, which is even crazier.
And you would have loved him because I remember him being such a hype prospect. He was just like it's like in like the mid-90s, you did not hear of prospects. And I knew the Yankees farm system because I had the Yankees magazine, which told you about the team and you gave you like updates on the farm system. ESPN, like going into the 1996 season, put out this magazine where they listed the top 30 prospects from each league, which I thought at the time was like practically unheard of. Like you really have to find like do deep dives into magazines to get this out. And Billy Wagner was listed as like the fifth prospect in the National League. I think that was when I guess he still would have been with the Marlins. Did he start there? Or maybe that wasn't. Maybe he's with the Padres. But I do remember
No,
Billy Wagner being on that list.
He was always in the Houston system.
Houston. Okay, well, maybe whatever. Then whatever. And Houston was in the National League back then, right? So,
yeah, they're National League back.
Yeah, there you go. He was. I vividly remember seeing him. Like I can still picture the list, and he's on there. I might actually still have it somewhere.
His rookie year, he pitched 37 games, had a 2.44 ERA out of the bullpen. Yeah. But every single year of his career, he had a sub 3 ERA, with the exception of 2000, where he only pitched 27 innings. Like the guy wasn't only like he didn't only have longevity, he was also his peak was outrageous as well. Like some of the year 157 ERA in 66 games in 1999. He finished fourth in Cy Young voting when relievers were like the really good relievers are few and far between. When considered now, you can probably name like 50 guys who are really good relievers now. Like he finished sixth in Cy Young voting in 2006. Back to that 1999 season, he also finished 16th in MVP voting. So you got MVP votes as a reliever in 1999, which is outrageous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really was. Like, I mean, and you're right. Like, I hold nothing against relievers. They're coming, they do a job, and they deserve recognition. They don't get it. And guys that can do, especially with relievers where they're so up and down year to year, you never know what you can get. Can blow out, arm can blow out at any time pitching that much. Guys that can do it over a long period of time absolutely deserve it. The game's evolved, and I think finally, like writers and everyone's catching up. And I think now you're going to start seeing some of these guys. And hopefully years from now, we get to see a guy like, I think John Franco deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I think he was a really, really good reliever for a long time. And I guess it'll be the Veterans Committee that hopefully gives him a chance one day down the line. I think, speaking of all this, John Franco was one of those guys that was a great reliever for a long time, but didn't get his due because it happened too soon.
Before we wrap this thing up, though, I do want to ask, if there's one player who's not on the ballot in a future year, just off the top of your head, there's someone who, who retired somewhat recently that you 100% believe will be a Hall of Famer, or that you just want to be a Hall of Famer, whatever, who would you go for?
That is a tough question because there's so many names coming up. And looking at 2025, there's 4 guys right off the bat for me. And there's 4 like definites. So I'm gonna go. Yeah, I gotta go with my guy CC Sabathia 2025. I'm looking forward to it. He'll go in with the Yankees hat, hopefully. And the way he ended his career too, just going all out, like giving everything he had, pretty much blowing out his knee in a playoff game. Just the guy, I love CC, and just all-time Yankee, and he gets my vote. I'm looking forward to it. I really hope he's the first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, that's totally fair. For me, I got to go Joe Mauer, who will be on the 2024 ballot. Like I said earlier, I'm big on peaks and guys are really good in their peaks. Obviously, Mauer didn't have the longevity, he wasn't. Well, I shouldn't say he didn't have longevity because he played till he was 35, right? But his peak is for a catcher, especially considering like he was in that time period in the AL where like when Pedroia won the '08 MVP. Like I love Dustin Pedroia. You put him in any other year, he doesn't touch the MVP. Doesn't get close. Joe Mauer in those years really like fourth in MVP voting, won an MVP in '09, eighth in MVP voting, also was sixth a couple years before that little stretch. Won Gold Gloves, won Silver Sluggers, like just the guy who was supposed to be the player of his generation at catcher, who was from Minnesota, playing for the Minnesota Twins, means so much to that franchise. And they had a couple good teams when he was there. Just to me, you can't. I think Mauer's a lock for me next year. If I was voting next year, Joe Mauer would be a definite lock. One of the few next year.
What he did as a catcher, just to be able to hit the way he did, he was so good. Man, yeah, he was something else. I can't believe he's already up for Hall of Fame ballot. It does not, that went by so quick.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's absolutely.
Like, I remember him coming up as a rookie. That's how how fast it seems. Like
yeah. Well, he was drafted in 2001. And he got up to the big leagues like outrageously quick. He made his debut in 2020, and not 2004. He was drafted in the 2001 draft, which remember is in the middle of 2001, out of high school. He was drafted out of high school and was in the big leagues like 3 years later. That's almost unheard of.
Yeah, it really was. And I mean, he's just one of those guys that lived up to the hype. It's unbelievable. Like looking at some of his batting averages, like I remember him just being an amazing hitter. But looking at, especially today, like in retrospect, we don't see averages like this. 347, 328, 365, 327 again. Like just as a catcher.
Exactly, as a catcher. I think that's what, and it's not like we're not saying catcher who was obviously he was a bat first guy, it's Joe Mauer, but was good behind the plate too. Like he obviously was not an elite defender behind the plate, but like considering the fact of how well he hit, like that's like the best catcher in the league for what solid like 5 or 6 years. Like that's ridiculous. I think that's a good place to wrap it up though. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. This is our fun Hall of Fame discussion. We'll probably have another Hall of Fame discussion closer to when the actual votes come out for the regular ballot, or after those, we'll have some sort of Hall of Fame discussion then. Again, if you guys have anyone you think should be Hall of Famers on this ballot, put them in the comments. Let us know what you guys think about the Hall of Fame. What are your thoughts on Bonds, the steroids guys? Your thoughts on just this year's ballot in general? It's an interesting one. But yeah, let us know. Check out all the links in the description of the Bleacher Brawls podcast website, Instagram, and Twitter, plus all the crew's Twitters. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. Get notified whenever we post by hitting that notification bell. For John, I'm Derek. Thanks for watching Bleacher Brawls, and we'll see you next time.